Alrighty, so today we are going to do the season preview of Charlotte FC, and there's no doubt that this has been an emotional offseason for the second year MLS team. I mean, we cannot start a season preview about Charlotte FC without talking about the tragic death of Anton Walkes during this offseason, and that, there's no doubt that I think there's going to be tribute that will be paid to their teammate, and that, it's either going to be happening in the opening week or even in the home opener where we know Charlotte is going to put out a big tifo for their home opener, and I will not be surprised it might be a tribute to Anton Walkes. I mean, in some way they've already started to pay tribute to their teammate. They have wear a patch with his initial in their preseason jersey, which is something you see common what other teams have done, where whenever someone means a lot to the organization that just passed away, you see like the patch put on the jersey or even in the helmet, depending on what sport you're talking about. And in this case, again, it's not a surprise that Anton Walkes' initial was on the jersey of these Charlotte FC players. And again, it's something that is completely unorthodox in a way that I have never seen this happen before, and it's such a very sad kind of event, and that the only way I think for Charlotte, of course, can move on from this and really just kind of honor the legacy of their teammate is to have a great season. And there's a chance that they can definitely do that and can also make the playoffs this season, because like I said, last year they came oh so close in terms of making the playoffs. They were fighting hard down the stretch to chase for the playoffs, but they just missed it with 2 games left. And when you look at this team, I know the East is going to be much tougher to make it to the playoffs because there's a lot of good Eastern Conference teams that you can say that are going to be guaranteeing themselves to make it to the playoffs. But when you look at this Charlotte team, they definitely have the edge in terms of getting into the playoffs. I mean, the core has started to kind of shaped up a little bit of the roster that they built. I mean, the midfield with the partnership with Bronico and Derek Jones, one of the best midfield duo in the leagues. And then going forward on the attacking end, I mean, they finally got their DP number 9 signing over the line in Enzo Copati, a player that, there was some that saying that maybe they weren't going to get that deal done during the off season, and it probably is going to be a case where he might be arriving during the summer transfer window instead. But no, instead they were able to get it done in the off season. And of course, we'll talk a little bit more about him and the fact that there is definitely going to be some very high expectation you can say that he might be facing in his first season in MLS, in his first season with Charlotte FC. But nevertheless, last season, as I mentioned, they came very close to making the playoffs. They finished with a respectable 13-3-18 record in their expansion season and finished with 42 points and finished 9th in the standings. In terms of players that they signed, obviously the big name here is Enzo Copati, that they signed him as the designated player forward. But they also got Ashley Westwood from Burnley, and this is definitely a player that I think is used for more for depth rather than just a regular starter, because Ashley Westwood, he did just came back from a knee injury, and he is approaching his mid-30s. And when you're approaching that kind of age and coming back from a season-ending knee injury, it's not easy to do, and especially he's probably going to be playing more limited minutes, which again it should be fine, because again you could use as a good depth piece for already a team that has 2 decent midfield player in Brent Bronico and Derek Jones in there. But then looking at some of the players that they pick in the Super Draft, which is something that I actually forgot to mention in my first free season preview that I've done so far, so I do apologize. Austin, Atlanta, and also St. Louis when I didn't mention in terms of the players that they drafted. Well, actually, with St. Louis, I think I mentioned it a little bit because of the fact that I pretty much put out the whole roster that they had for their expansion season. But in the case of Charlotte, they got Patrick Agamin and Hamadi Diop as one of the draft pick. Now, in the case of Hamadi Diop, they actually select him as the number 1 overall pick for this season's Super Draft. And again, going back to the tragic death of Anton Walkes, which he was supposed to be one of the starting center back of this team, alongside with Melinda on the back line. But like I said, with the tragic death of him, it seems like maybe Hamidou Diop is going to accelerate right into that starting role, and that's a daunting task too, because You know, we seen before where especially there are some certain players that get thrust right into the action coming out of college, but it's going to be interesting to see whether if Hamidou Diab is going to be ready, and especially again being the number one pick, you know that there's going to be some expectation that he's going to be decent, and especially from what I heard that a lot of people said that he's not only the best defender in the draft, but probably the best defender we have seen in the past couple of years of the Super Draft. So yeah, no pressure on the young man. Let's see if he can, of course, jump straight into the deep end and thrust right into the starting role to be a decent player. But in terms of some of the players that they decided to move on, there wasn't actually as much as what you think an expansion team usually do, because usually with an expansion team they maybe move on with a lot of the pieces that didn't fit during their expansion season. But in this case, they only got rid of Jordi the Alciver, Daniel Rios, Adrian Zanijaz, Quinn McNeil, Christian Fuchs, and of course the unfortunate tragedy of Anton Walkes that happened during this off season. That's why I put the rest in peace sign. And then of course Christian Fuchs, of course, this off season decided to hang up his boots. But really, the only player that I can say, you know, they really got rid of him because he didn't quite fit the system is Jordi Alcivar and maybe Quinn McNeil, because Daniel Rios, you know, there was that discussion, should they have kept him or should they not, because he was performing very well last season, especially once he came in for this team from Nashville SC. But they decided to kind of cash in on that a little bit, decided to sell him off to Chivas, and knowing the fact that they, of course, not only got a replacement for him, but maybe a player that is a little bit better than him in that number 9 spot, you know, they had no problem in terms of deciding to moving on from him and even make a quick buck out of that. Now, in terms of the strength of this team, it's definitely the midfield of this team that is a strength, and maybe on the attacking front too. I mean, when you look at this front three, obviously Kopati will be the number 9 player, and you got Shvedetsky in that number 10 row, and then on the left side, it could be Vargas, it could be Bender on that left side, and on the right, oh god, I forgot who of course play right wing for the Charlotte players. I'm having a moment here just forgot who of course play in that right wing area. In fact, I can maybe even look in the, actually I can, where is my phone? Oh, it's all the way over there. But you know, you get my point in terms of the fact that, oh, now I remember, it's going to be Kamil Jozwiak that's going to be playing in that spot, and I forgot he of course play in that spot too, though again, as I mentioned last season, he was definitely a huge flop when it comes to playing in that spot. But you know, when you look at this front three or front four, depending on how you look, it's decent. I mean, it's a very underrated front four. I think there is definitely goals that could be found on this team compared to what we saw last season when they only scored 44 goals. But obviously, the weakness of this team is going to be on the defensive front. Again, you know, losing Anton Walkes not only was a tragic death, but also just it was a huge loss in terms of him being one of the star center back of this team, and that, you know, we'll see whether or not if Diop can step straight into that spot and have a decent replacement. But also, I think there's that question of the depth of this team. I mean, when you look at the back line, they do lack a little bit depth in terms of that back line, and that's definitely something that they're going to address heading into this season and even in the summer transfer window. Now, in terms of the big question of this team, how will Latancia do now that he took charge of this team permanently? So, you know, we have seen before where interim head coach basically transitioned into a permanent role, and they have done relatively well. But then we also have seen that at times it hasn't gone as smoothly as it goes, and it's going to be interesting to see that, you know, Latancio, I think the system that he played last season, you know, the players eventually started to trust in his system. And in some case, you know, Christian Latancio, it's kind of interesting the fact that, yes, he was the interim head coach last season, but he was an interim head coach for a very long time. Like, as I mentioned with last season with Miguel Angel Ramirez getting dismissed in the early part of the season, that kind of gave Latancio a lot of the rest of the season to kind of organize to a team where, you know, again, I think there was no doubt that he deserved to be promoted to being the permanent head coach of this team, because the fact that he was able to get every squeeze out of that quality that this team has, which this team didn't have a lot of quality last season, but the fact that he was able to get every ounce of that quality on this team, and especially working with a relatively limited squad, yeah, I think he could do just as fine, especially with them potentially adding more pieces as the offseason goes along. And then, of course, the second big question, and this probably is the biggest question of this offseason, or the biggest question not for the offseason, but for this season itself, is how many goals will Enzo Kopeti score this season? Or I think the right question to ask is how will Enzo Kopeti perform this season? Because, while I know that he has been a guy that has been highly rated down in Argentina, especially last season with Rossing, he really set the league on fire with just crazy amount of goals, and kind of a player that just kind of came out of nowhere to be a lethal goal scorer. We don't know if that, of course, will transition into this season too, because there's one thing of being a player that could have an amazing goal scoring year, but it can be very tough to try to follow that up heading into the second season, and especially for a player like Kopeti heading into a new league and heading to a complete new system that Charlotte, of course, run. We don't know if he is going to be performing well and, of course, score the goals for Charlotte. Now, the good news for him is that he's definitely going to get a lot of service. As I mentioned, with this attack for Charlotte, they definitely have a couple of decent playmaker. I mean, Schwiderski. It's hard to believe this has become a guy that he was supposed to be the main number 9 in terms of scoring the goals, but now he's starting to play more as a number 10 and kind of almost play as a playmaker kind of role. Rather than just kind of be a true goal scorer that Charlotte, of course, originally envisioned him to be. And the other thing to mention, guys like Ben Bender, he's another guy that can be a playmaker. And even when you look at the midfield and especially look at Brand Bronicle, he's also one of the more underrated number 8s in the league, a guy that can be a deep line playmaker as well. So service will definitely not be one thing that Enzo Kopeti will be lacking this season. It's all about whether or not if you can put away those chances. And also, the other most important aspect of being a striker, you need to have some good movements, and you need to able to find yourself in open space to able to get those service, and that's going to be something that I think Kopeti, it'll be interesting to see whether if he can do that. I mean, not all strikers have that ability, but we know some of the best ones has that ability, and that is why they always find ways to, of course, score goals and even create the chances on their own too. Now, the other big question coming into this season is actually the goalkeeping situation, because Sisiaga, of course, will be the starting goalkeeper of this team, I'm assuming, because Kalina is still recovering from a back injury that he had to, or a back injury that he had throughout the offseason. He had to undergo surgery in terms of that. So in comes Pablo Sisiaga, and again, this is a guy that I'm pretty sure that he's been very patient in terms of getting his chances. I know that when he came to Charlotte last season, he was hoping that he was going to come to the expansion team to finally get some more playing time compared to the time when he was with LAFC. Obviously, that did not happen, but I have a feeling that there could be a chance that he could take advantage of it, because, again, goalkeeping is always that one position where you really need to take advantage of chances that you are given, because it's not a position where coaches usually switch out very often. And that, again, if Sisiaga is going to perform very well, then even when Kalina is back, I won't be surprised Latanzios would just stick with Sisiaga for the rest of the season. And then, of course, a bonus big question, because I've been kind of doing a lot of that in the season preview so far of all these teams I've mentioned, is will they add more depth in the defensive area? I already mentioned before, I think they still need some more depth in that area. And the same goes for the midfield too a little bit. It would be nice for them to maybe add another essential defensive midfielder on this team too. But other than that, again, the Charlotte FC team, I don't know if they're going to have a second season similar to what we saw Austin FC had. I mean, I don't think that's going to be the case, because what we saw from Austin FC last season was just completely out of the blue. But there's no doubt that I have a feeling this team will be competitive again, and there could be a chance that they could take that next step of being a playoff team, even though, as I mentioned, it's going to be a bit of a bloodbath this season in the Eastern Conference, because there is a lot of good teams in the Eastern Conference that you can make a case that could potentially make it to the playoffs. But let me know in the comments below, what do you think of this video? And if you're a Charlotte FC fan, what do you think your prediction is going to be for this season, and also your expectation for this upcoming season. But until then, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash the subscribe button, and yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.